is life, and it is on the basis of this that every single human on the planet look for food for survival. Because food is the foundation of our growth and healthy living, yet it is affected by a series of avoidable dangers from every angle. We can strengthen our food systems and change the narrative through a new approach to improved food availability and healthy diet.
Welcome to Urban Family Farming,
where we explore the exciting world of urban farming. Learn how to transform your living space into a green oasis with our expert tips and tricks. Join us on a journey towards sustainable living and discover the joy of growing your own food in the heart of the city.
So the question is, how do I prevent excess water and prevent waterlogging in my garden? So number one, before we answer the question, we need to find what the problem is. What are the factors that are responsible for excess water, and what are the things that cause waterlogging in our gardens or in our farms? So you see, the first thing that causes waterlogging or excess water is the topography or the water table of the area. If the water table of the area where your farm is very high, it's naturally going to happen that when rain falls, the water table naturally goes up, okay? So when the water table goes up, then that means that naturally there will be waterlog in that area. Like for example, in swampy areas, you will naturally find out that in those areas there is always waterlogging. Like in areas where there are fadama areas where you plant rice, you plant sugarcane and all of those stuff. Because the water table there is high, there's always waterlogging, there's always excess water there. Another thing that causes excess water in farm and in gardens is the soil preparation. If you don't do the soil preparation well, definitely there will be waterlogging. Now, for example, if your soil has high content of clay, if the soil has high content of clay, remember, soil that is clayey has the capacity to retain more water. And so if you begin to irrigate your soil, if you begin to irrigate your farm, and then it is highly clayey, it will have absorbed a lot of water. And then clay naturally retains water. It does not allow quick drainage or draining of water. So naturally, if you have water in the soil and you are adding more water to the soil, you will naturally have what we call surface overflow. And that surface overflow is as a result of excess water in the pore spaces of the soil. Let me explain what I mean. Every soil you see, whether it is sandy, whether it is clay, whether it is loamy, it has pore spaces. Pore spaces is the spaces in between the soil in the ground. As the soil is in the ground, there's spaces in the soil. Okay? That pore spaces or spaces in the soil contains air or water. All right? It contains air or water. That's why every soil structure has three components. There's the solid part, there's the liquid part, and there is the gaseous part. The solid part is the hard part that we all touch, the one that we all know. But as you break it, you will discover that inside that same soil, there are spaces in between the soil. And the spaces in between them is where the gases now hide themselves. And in between that space, between where the gases and the solid part is where the water moisture content hides itself. So there is the solid part, there's the liquid part, and then there is the gaseous part of the soil. So if for example, clay, if you put water to the clay soil, and then the water fills up the space in between the sand, naturally what will happen is that all the gaseous part of the soil will come out. So which means there will be release of gas in the soil. So which means there will be no gas. Then the next thing that will follow will now be that the soil will have absorbed enough moisture, which means there will be no space for the soil to contain more water. So the next thing that will happen is that the excess water will now begin to flow on the surface of the soil. That's what we now call excess water or waterlogging. That's what results to excess water or excess waterlogging. So to control that, in your soil preparation, very important, in your soil preparation, make sure that you don't use or you don't have too much clay in the soil. If there's too much clay, it will retain more water and then it will lead to excess water or water lodging. And then number 2, in your irrigation simply means water application. Okay, so in your irrigation, in water application, when you are applying water, there's something we call irrigation water schedule. The irrigation water schedule is the time that the soil have already used up the available water that the plant is supposed to use. Okay, so when the plant use up the water, it's like somebody who eats breakfast. You know, by afternoon, 12, 1 o'clock, you start feeling hungry. That hunger that you start feeling means that your body have already used up the food that you had for breakfast. Okay, so what do you want to do by 1, 2 o'clock? You want to go for your lunch. Okay, so you now go back and have your lunch to refill that empty space that your body have used up, that your stomach has eaten it up. So by evening again, you want another refilling, you go for your dinner. So that's the progression of this thing we call the pore spaces in the soil. So in irrigation water schedule, what happens now is that after you apply water in the morning, for example, and the plants have not used up all the water, used up there will now mean the plant have absorbed the water that it needs, and then the remaining water, the soil have drained the excess water remaining in the soil, which means the plant can no longer absorb the remaining water in the soil. So what will now happen is that you will now come and refill the soil with water. So if that water has not been drained and the remaining water, the plant have not absorbed it, and then the soil is filled up with water and you add more water to it, that excess water that you've added will now come to the surface of the soil. And that is excess water. So when you now begin to have excess water or water lodging, then it means number 1, because the root of the plant now will be inside water continually, the root will start to get rotten. And when the root gets rotten, definitely the entire plant is going to collapse. The other thing that will happen again is that when the water start flooding on top of the soil, there's what we call fungi. You notice some soil, after a while, because of excess water, you will see a green layer that has formed on the surface of the soil. That green layer is actually a fungus or a fungi formation on top of the soil. That thing is also as a result of excess water in the soil. So how do you control that? What you want to do is that you want to make sure that in your soil preparation, you add a lot of compost. You add a lot of compost. Compost is very important because it helps in the aeration of the soil, so that when the soil absorbs water, there will be good drainage and there will just be sufficient water for the plant to use. Okay, so make sure that your soil preparation, your soil structure has good aeration. So as you are adding water, the water is retained enough for the plant to use, and then the excess water is drained off. So make sure your soil structure is good. And then another thing you want to do also is create a channel, like in greenhouse, for example, or in your open field production, there's what we call ridges, right? The reason for the ridges is because excess water that comes on the ridges will fall into the furrow. You know, the furrow is that thing that looks like a drainage in the farm. The excess water drains into the furrow and then it drains out of the farm. So you want to create a system in such a way that if you are putting your water, if you're applying your water in your irrigation, you want to make sure that there is a way that the excess water can drain out so that you don't have lodging. I'll give you a good example for people who plant in bags. For people who plant in bags like feed bags, cement bags, for example. I always advise that you use feed bags. The reason why I advise that you use feed bags is because the cement bags normally come with leather. It's perforated on the inside. Normally there's leather inside that does not allow water to get to the cement. So normally what I advise is that if you are using cement bags, you need to get a knife or something that you can use to perforate the bag, so that leather inside that they use to cover the cement from water touching it, you perforate it so that the water that enters into the soil can drain out. But if you are using feed bags, naturally feed bags have pore spaces already on it. So when you now put the soil inside the feed bag and you put the water, you will naturally even see the water draining out of the feed bag because it comes naturally perforated around it. So if you are using bags to plant, make sure that the bags, if it is cement bag, it is perforated. If it is feed bag, which is better, naturally make sure that the soil is well prepared so that it can naturally drain out. If you are using pots, people who plant in flower pots and all that, make sure that the flower pot is perforated under and on the side as well, so that the water can naturally drain out. When you do that, you will not have problem with water lodging and excess water on your farm or in your garden. Okay, so that's